God's just that awesome. We don't have to be a slave to fear. Let's flip over to 1 Samuel 17. Jump in with a very familiar story. I was reading it one day, and I started connecting things to real life. You know how sometimes you could read a story over and over? We say, but there's a certain point, there's a certain a message that really connects. It was written however long ago, but something connects with the very thing that you're going through. Well, let's jump into it. 1 Samuel 17:1. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shoko, which I looked it up. Shoko was actually, it actually explains it, which belongeth to Judah. But I looked in, it was in Israel. So the Philistines gathered together in Israel's territory. I was thinking, how many times does the enemy come against us in our territory, in the battlefield of our mind? In our mind, our emotions, our soul, our spirit. How many times does he just cause trouble? Now let's keep going. They pitched a tent, or they pitched between Shoko and Azekah and Ephes Dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. So we get this picture of the Philistines on their side, the armies of Israel on their side, and there's a big valley between them. So just set that in the mental picture here. So each side, if they're both on hillsides, they can see each other. So how many times do we see the circumstance, and we're very well of a circumstance that we're going through, and it doesn't ever go away? It's always there. It's always visible. It's always something that's nagging at you. Back of your mind. Let's continue. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Another translation says 9 feet tall. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 500 shekels, or 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. I thought it was neat how the King James said a target between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. So all of that armor, I looked up, was about, at least the good majority of it was about 150 pounds. So just imagine, again, that same perspective of you looking over and you see the problem. Like the men went into the promised land. They see these giants. They see the obstacle in their way. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, verse 8, and said unto them, why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. So why is this Philistine in the land of Israel calling the shots? And I was like, why do we let the problem call the shots? We go on. If ye be able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. Now, to some that might seem pretty easy. Oh, wow, well, we only got to kill one guy and they're all of our slaves. But think about it on the reverse perspective. So you're in your own territory. This guy's calling the shots. And if you miss, then you're a slave to the very thing putting you down. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. And when Saul and all of Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. And it's easy to quickly think, wow, well, these faithless people, they should have just stood up to Goliath. Well, I understand that. And in all reality, by the letter of the book, yeah, they should have. But imagine this. I'm 6 foot tall. So imagine 3 foot above me. And imagine his armor alone weighs half my weight. Just to be real, in the house of God. And and I just put that in perspective, and I was like, man, first of all, just the fear of actually having to take care of this problem, but also on each and every person is the weight of everybody else. Because if one of those people, well, I got Goliath, I can take care of him. Well, they're also deciding the fate of the rest of Israel. So I was like, whoa, I could understand why that would be a big deal. And nobody's raising their hands really fast. Verse 12. Now David. And in another translation it said, and one day. And I was like, how cool is it? The way God works is, okay, all this battle, all this stuff's going on, all this emotional drama, people shaking in their boots. Okay, all that aside. And one day, David. David was the son of an Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. And he had 8 sons, and the man went among men for an old man in the days of Saul, and the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul into battle. So the older 3, they're fighting in that fight. They're fighting in that battle. So I just think of if I had older brothers, typically they look up to the older brother. And so they're going out to fight. I would imagine they're probably pretty sturdy people. And so the 3 sons of Jesse went and followed Saul into battle. And the names of his 3 sons that went into battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and next Abinadab, and Shema. And David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul. We got that. And the Philistine drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. I was thinking this all took place in one afternoon or something like that. 40 days. This Philistine, this Goliath of Gath, was walking back and forth, defying the armies of God. Now, whether they were fighting amongst themselves or if Goliath had halted everything until the man was presented, or I don't know exactly. But 40 days. That's over a month deciding who's going to go fight this guy. And I was like, I was thinking of depression, anxiety. I work with some people that deal with that, and it's very real. And I was like, that doesn't just creep up overnight. That's one subtle little comment. That's, I'm not good enough. That's, I can't do that. Like Avery said, I'm not good enough to do that. Yeah, nothing's impossible with God, but I fill in the blank. Those little things, 40 days, 40 nights. You continue on and continue on. It changes the way you think. It changes the way your heart believes. So when somebody said, God is good, God is great, though you agree with that, it's hard to feel it in your spirit. If you've been listening to all this craziness, all this junk over and over and over, and you put it in your heart and you believe it. So he presented himself 40 days. Verse 17, and Jesse said unto David his son. So, again, all this has been going on. Jesse said to David, take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare. So how are they doing? And take their pledge. And in another translation, it says to give a report. Send me a report. Let me know how they're doing. So Jesse tells David to go on this little mission. And I was thinking just how cool it is, because I know we all know the end of this story. But I was like, how cool is it? God didn't, well, just like with Moses, he can say, I've appointed you to go deliver my people from Egypt. Whoa. But with David, hey, go give your brother some food. He didn't lead with any big, dramatic fanfare. He didn't put a whole bunch of weight on David's shoulders that he couldn't bear. It started with, hey, go feed your brothers. Verse 19, now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning, so probably the next day, and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And I was thinking about how he didn't argue with that. He didn't put up a fight, didn't get all confused and, well, what if? Well, how? Well, maybe. Well, you sure it was that much? Or can I? Or when should I go? Or he rose up and he did what Jesse told him to do. But then beyond that, it said that he left the sheep with a keeper. And to David, we know that he's a shepherd boy. And so he was in charge of the sheep. So when something's valuable to you, you make sure that it's taken care of. You know, you don't leave your children alone at the house when they're young. You make sure you have somebody to take care of them. And so I was thinking, so he left them with a keeper and took and went as Jesse had commanded him, and he came to the trench, as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army, and David left the carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brothers. So, hey guys, how's it going? You know, David's here. He shows up on the scene. In verse 23, and as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words as David had heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. So this same condition, after 40 days, after David shows up, they're still afraid. Verse 25, and the men of Israel said, have you seen this man that has come up? Surely to defy Israel as he had come up. And shall be that a man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel, meaning they won't have to pay taxes. So what I think is funny is they're not arguing the morality of what's going on. They're saying, hey, the first one who takes him down gets all these riches, gets these rewards. So they're squabbling over rewards now. And David gets confused. Verse 26, and David spake to the man that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man who killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? I love that phrase. What shall be done? So David arrives. He doesn't know all this emotional drama going on in the background. And he sees everybody afraid, running around, talking about, hey, man, you'll get a reward if you beat him. Hey, well, if you beat him, well, hey, we got a reward over here. Well, hey, did you hear about that? You won't even have to pay taxes. And David's going, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine? Take away the reproach from Israel. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? See, I love how pure a perspective that is. He doesn't see, and I defy the armies of the living God, 9 feet tall and heavy armor. And he's just like, who is this guy? That he's in our land calling the shots. Who is this guy? Verse 27, and the people answered him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done with the man that killeth him. So again, they're talking about the rewards. They're like, yep, all these things are going to happen to the guy who kills him. And Eliab, so older brother, heard when he spake unto the man, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, so older brother got annoyed. Why are you asking all these people this? Why are you here? What's your purpose? Keep in mind, he was only trying to feed his brothers. He was only trying to take care and do what his father told him. He said, why camest thou down hither? Why are you here? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? Of all that's going on, why does he care about the sheep? Now I was thinking, how much like that is when it's those little bitty things that get us all riled up and we forget the blessings of the Lord. It's, well, she looked at me that way. Well, he looked at me that way. Well, they didn't say, God bless you. Well, it may sound silly, but those things over and over and over and over and over will change how we treat others. Watch this. So why'd you come here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mayest see the battle. So you just wanted to see the battle. You wanted to see all the fighting. You didn't really care about anything. Why are you even here? And David said, what have I done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. So they're still talking about the rewards. And so he ignored Big Brother. Big Brother is putting him down. You're just a shepherd boy. Why are you even here? And the words were heard which David spake, and they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. So Saul knows now that David's around. He said, hey, David, I want to talk to you. And David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight this Philistine. So something happened between the time of his older brother getting mad at him and him noticing what this giant is doing and him meeting before Saul, that he doesn't give any excuses. It's a no-brainer to him. Hey, let me go, and he's even courteous about it. Let no man's heart fail. Like, let nobody have a heart attack, because thy servant will go and fight this Philistine. I'll do it. If none of you guys will, I'll do it. Take note, he also doesn't mention anything about a reward. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine and fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. So this guy is a warrior, and you're nothing but a youth. So to say a shepherd boy, that's all you are, a shepherd boy. So twice he's now told that he's just a shepherd boy. And this guy's a big warrior. Well, what I think is really interesting, the next few verses, though he's been told that twice, he flips that to what I call his resume. Because he said, and David said, verse 34, unto Saul, thy servant has kept his father's sheep. Yeah, I'm a shepherd boy. And there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and I smote him, and I delivered it out of his mouth when he arose against me. I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. So he said, yeah, I'm a shepherd boy. I keep after my sheep. I slew the bear, I slew the lion, I took care of this. And then he said, and this uncircumcised Philistine, which is the second time he said that, shall be as one of them, seeing that he's defied the armies of the living God. So what's awesome is he doesn't equate size, height, teeth, claws, anything. He's looking at the circumstance. This guy is coming to my territory, defying my God. This is going to be like all the others. And David said, moreover, the Lord has delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear. He will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, go. What Satan means us to do harm, God can use for his glory. In one sentence, just restating the fact that he was a shepherd boy, convinced Saul, okay, go. And Saul armed David with his armor and put on a helmet of brass upon his head, so that he was armed with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And I was thinking, that's like when you don't know what to do what you know to do. You know, a lot of times we try to act like this certain preacher. Or, well, let me pray in this certain way and maybe it'll be a little bit more faithful this time. Well, let me sing this way and maybe they'll hear me even more. Or maybe if I pray harder or if I, fill in the blank. Be who you are and who God's created you to be. Don't try to live in the armor of something you're not. And he took his staff in his hand, and he chose from him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, what he's used to, the shepherd boy. And chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, because he's a shepherd boy. Even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistine. And the Philistine came to draw near unto David. And the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and with fair countenance. And I was like, here's the third time. You're just a shepherd boy. So not only with his older brother, not only with the king's army, now with the very thing that he's coming up against. So he's passed 1, 2. Now this is the third time. This is the final time to back down. Because everybody else will sure back you up. Oh, I know. Yeah, I know why you should be afraid. Oh, yeah, no, I totally understand. Don't worry about it. And the Philistine, verse 43, said unto David, Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. I could see like a little switch going off in David. To the beast of the field. The lion, the bear, I slew them. The God that delivered me from them is going to deliver me from this giant. So he's telling him that he's going to feed David to the very thing that God's already delivered him from. How many times did he said, well, I'm going to treat in this season, why is it going to be any different than the last season? God delivered me then. He's going to deliver me again. Let's continue. It gets even better. Verse 45, Then David said to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of the hosts, Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel. I was thinking, well, let me continue before I get ahead of myself. Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. The day of the Lord, or this day, will the Lord deliver me into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and I will take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day into the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. So again, David flips that back. And no, it's you that's going to be fed to the lion, to the bear, to the beasts of the earth. And what I mean is to paint a picture of the very thing that was used against him. You're just a shepherd boy. You're just a shepherd boy. You're just a shepherd boy. Yeah, I am a shepherd boy. Great job. And all the assembly shall know that the Lord saveth, not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass when the Philistine rose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And I was thinking, I say that phrase a lot. I think a lot. David ran to it. Once he got his confidence and knew who he was and believed that God was going to deliver him, he didn't sit and consider it any longer. Well, maybe, might. Oh, I didn't think about that. And so on and so forth. He ran to the fight. And David put in his hand his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead. As the stone sunk into his forehead and fell upon his face to the earth. That's a one-hit KO. There was no fight. All these men had been worrying about a grand battle. That was the outcome of their drama. So let me read the next few verses quickly. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran again and stood upon the Philistine and took his sword and drew it out of the sheath thereof and slew him and cut off his head therewith. And then Philistines saw their champion was dead, and they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted and pursued the Philistines until thou come into the valley and the gates of Ekron. And the wounded Philistines fell down by the way to Sharon, even unto Gath, and to Ekron. What's funny is the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way, even unto Gath. That was Goliath's hometown. That was his turf. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines and spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem and put his armor in his tent. And when Saul saw David go before the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the Lord's host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. So I got an image of, who is this guy? The same guy that was just saying, you're just a shepherd boy. I was like, who is this guy? The king said, inquire thou whose son the stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him, brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand, with the triumph, with the trophy of the deliverance that God had given him. And Saul said, this was like my grand finale in my mind. I was like, and Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, thou young man? And David answered, I'm the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. It's like, I'm the shepherd boy. Doesn't have to be a big title. I'm exactly what God needs me to be in the place to take care of the situation that's too big for others to handle. But only David. And he wasn't even in the battle to begin with. So I just want to say, of all that reading, is that God can meet you where you are. One day, David. And then with the battle of your mind, emotions, things that we deal with every day, realize that the God that got you out of that one season and met you in this season is the God that's going to meet you in this season. Whether it has teeth, whether it has claws, whether it's 9 foot tall, it don't matter. And how David told Goliath, you come at me with a sword and a spear and a shield. I was thinking about battling those things in your mind. I come at you with the sword of the Spirit that divides between soul and marrow. The rest of the verse. The thoughts and the intents of the heart. And I come at you with the shield of faith. That no, none of the fiery darts of the wicked one are going to have any place in our soul. So I want to encourage you tonight. I know it's been a little bit longer, but fight those giants. Because they're no different than any other season.